Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, whoever may be listening from wherever you may be in the world. I want to give thanks for this conversation that we are having. Dianna Vagianos Armentrout and I are having a shared conversation once again on pregnancy loss. And Dianna has a beautiful book that she has allowed me to read, and we will be discussing bits and pieces throughout this book. It's called Walking the Labyrinth of My Heart, A Journey of Pregnancy, Grief, and Newborn Death. So this is Dianna's experience that we are discussing today and her story. And also a very big part of this story is her baby, Mary Rose. So Dianna, I absolutely loved your book. The tenderness with which you wrote it. Of course, you were sharing a lot of the emails and the journaling and anything else that was through here, that messages that you shared with others. And so it came from the place that you were in each moment. And I could feel so much of that. And my heart just went out to you with every page that I turned. So maybe you would like to begin by just sharing about your experience, what brought this this book about, and we'll just go and see where the story wants to go.
Well, thank you for reading it and for having me. The book is very eclectic, as I am, I think. So it has raw journal entries, in the moment of finding out during pregnancy that my baby had trisomy 18. It's not technically a diagnosis at that point until the baby is born. But I had a sense that she wasn't going to live long. There's poetry in there and some blog posts. Some of the chapters are on my blog. And I did share emails from my mentor, Cubby, who has since passed away, encouraging me just to love this baby and appreciate the gift that she is. And I wanted to share that with people because when I was pregnant, I mean, there are some books out there, and I'm sure some have been written after this. My experience was in 2014, but there was nothing that really spoke deeply, deeply to my heart. I did like Nancy Meyer Whittington's book. I think it's called For the Love of Angela. I might be getting the title wrong, but that was a lovely book. And she and Cubby founded Isaiah's Promise. And so that's how I got in touch with them. And they support families who choose to carry with life-limiting diagnoses. So they would send me little presents for Mary Rose, and Cubby would send me these wonderful emails. And that support meant so much because I think most people check out when you have news of miscarriages and losses. They just check out. They cannot cope, or it's too uncomfortable, or people don't know what to say. And so my work is to help people through that, first supporting families going through these difficult situations, and then doing work, for example, with the Colorado End of Life Collaborative, where I represent this part of the journey. Many of them are end of life doulas, but we just need to be able to talk about this. So many babies die, so many women carry losses for decades till the end of their life. They talk about them,
Yes.
And it's okay. And I don't like the perspective that it's a bad, something bad that happened. Or I had a friend send me this email, and she said, I heard that terrible thing that happened to you. And I wrote back and I said, Mary Rose is not terrible. And just being able to carry the grief and the joy at the same time, which is so hard. It's hard. You have to train your brain to do it, right? Because we can just drown in our grief, but just finding joy in the flowers and the feathers and all these beautiful things on our path.
Exactly. That's something that I speak of quite often. And I've found through this series of A Mother's Heart that I've been having with other women, so many women have been walking the path of carrying both grief and joy. And it really is a training. Like, you really have to be conscious of what you're doing. And what I love about your story, because similarly, as you were speaking, my story is of pregnancy loss, and I carried that grief for many, many years. So I'm one of those that carried the grief, and I only saw the darkness of it. That shifted over time. But you were very conscious of your journey. You were very conscious from the get-go. It seemed that your choice, yours and your husband's choice, to carry Mary Rose through your full pregnancy, despite so much that you had been bombarded with. And I love that you say here, the decision to carry a child with a fatal illness to term or not, to choose life support for an unborn baby or not, to plan a funeral instead of renting a nursery. These are all private decisions. And for those that they should weigh in, let me stop you here. Only if a couple asks, what should we do? Is it appropriate to give advice? And so you give some very clear guidance throughout as you're sharing your own story. You give some very clear guidance for other families, other women who may be experiencing something very similar. And so there's just so much wisdom in
Thank
this
you.
book.
There's something about a pregnant body that becomes a public space. People pat you on the belly, and some of it's very authentic and joyous and joyful. But when people start to tell you what to do, and people in church were telling me to have an abortion, and I was told I didn't have faith because I had accepted her diagnosis. Do you pray? People kept asking if I pray. I thought, this is not helpful. This isn't helpful. And then and I am pro-choice politically, but the pro-choice folks thought I would automatically have an abortion. And none of that is helpful. It's so private. And regardless of what a woman chooses, we need to support each other. And I wanted every woman to know she was welcome at my table in this book. It doesn't matter what you've chosen. Some people are very adamant about life support and having surgeries, and we could have trached Mary Rose. She still would have died. But for us, we just felt if she couldn't breathe on her own, we had to let her go at that moment. And there are people who disagree with that decision, who think we didn't fight hard enough. What do they call it? Heroic measures. I think it's heroic when you sit down in the pit of that grief, right? And the molasses of the grief, and you just feel it and you walk through it. And it's so hard to get through. It's so, thick and difficult. And I know you work with families who've only had pregnancy loss. I mean, I had 4 pregnancies and I have 1 living child, and it's hard. And this isolation has been difficult, for my son, who would like a sibling, and and there's, and I had him first. So for people whose first is a loss, it's so difficult and so challenging. And if we could only nurture each other and feed each other's souls with, I don't know what to say. Can I make you a cup of tea? Can I come sit with you? This is what people don't understand, right? There's no one who can come and sweep in and offer solutions, but just to have some companionship. And when I teach my workshops, when we did them in person, I would have strangers sit back to back on the floor and not talk for a couple of minutes and just feel that support on their back. And it's such a profound experience, because you don't have to say anything. And I think for me, part of the concern is that after whatever ritual you choose to do, what happens as a woman when people ask, do you have children? I hate that question. How many children do you have? And then you tell them and they can't hold it. And they walk away, or they seem upset because you told them that you've had a death or a loss. And I'm like, wait a minute, you brought it. And so what becomes of all of us who are holding these losses and who don't have a space in our daily society where we can be who we are, and where we can just be accepted for who we are.
Mhm.
And it's hard. When Mary Rose died, I went to this mom's group, and you could feel people physically pulling away, because we remind people
Mm,
that their children
yes,
could die, right?
yes. That is very true. That is
Yeah.
very true. Yeah.
And they can
Mhm.
die, right? Children do
Yes,
die.
and
And so,
that is the reality of it. Yeah, that's
right.
the reality. Yes.
And I wrote in my book, in the history of humanity, right? People will say, oh, it's unnatural to bury your child. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Look at humanity. We're a grain of
Mhm.
sand, right? And all of the people who've lived here, people have always, mothers have always buried their children, and from
Yes.
our oldest myths and legends and stories.
Yeah.
So how can we turn this into a sacred journey
Mhm.
of transformation, of love? It still hurts. I'm not going to pretend it
Mhm.
doesn't, but how can we honor these children? How can we honor ourselves as mothers of them? You
Mhm.
know?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and that's one thing here that you say on page 35. You say, Mary Rose has taught me to embrace death fully as a part of life. How could I honor her without honoring her death? How could I love her and hold her without freeing her to do her sacred work? I was just like, oh my God, yes, yes. If we could only see it in that way, I mean, we still feel the grief of it all, but to see that honoring that they also have a sacred work to do.
Mhm. And
Oh,
they're our ancestors. As
yes,
backwards as that sounds to some
yes,
people,
yeah,
that they become our helpers and our spirit guides and our, angels, whatever
absolutely.
language you
Yeah.
use, but that they're still part of the family.
Mhm.
And the love keeps growing. That's why
Yeah.
it still hurts, right?
Yes.
The love
Yes.
transforms. It doesn't
Mhm.
end.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. So that was just a powerful, powerful statement. And I won't read your part about the midwives here, but as my sister-in-law is also a midwife, I love how, despite everything else that's around that particular 3 pages that you honor each one of them with such grace. And it was just so tender the way you spoke of them, and each one individually, and the support that they gave you, and in spite of everything else that took place all around that. It was such an honoring. And so I just felt it was so beautiful the way you placed that in the pages there. So that will go down in history for those women that supported you in that way.
yeah. And how I was so blessed to have, I had this core group. It was a small group, really strangers, right? I had just met them, who walked me through this and gave me a blessing way, and just loved this
Yes.
baby, and we're willing
Yes.
to witness the baby, right?
Mhm.
In life and in death. And so, yeah, that
Yes.
was such a special, I'm still close with them. They're such lovely
Oh,
people.
oh, I'm so
Yeah.
glad. I'm so glad that you're so close with them. That's wonderful. Um, and then you go on to mention birth announcements after a newborn death, and how it touches your heart. It's breaking your heart as you're receiving these birth announcements, and you want to be happy for those mothers that are giving
Mhm.
birth, and yet you're still in that place of really feeling your broken heart. um, and you want to share in their joy, but you're feeling so much grief. And so there's that moment in time where it's you're feeling maybe torn back and forth, and there's so much emotion in that space. Maybe you could speak to that for other mothers who are in that space, who may be listening, just how to
Mhm.
hold themselves in those moments.
It's hard. I mean, I still have a hard time when I see a brand new newborn. It's trauma, right? The brain goes
Yeah.
back to holding your dead baby. I mean, the
Yes.
brain can't help it. For me, once they're, I think, 2 or 3 months old, it's
Mhm.
okay. Like, I can separate it from Mary Rose. But I think what happens is, when you have this experience, and even miscarriages as well, they're so
Mhm.
painful. how do you, bring this into the world, and how do you keep space for the losses? And
Yes,
so that's why I wrote about the birth announcements, because I mean, in many ways my book is a how-to, right? Like,
it
you
is.
need to
It
do this,
absolutely
you
is.
need to go to this doctor and
Yeah.
figure this out. And we want perinatal hospice, not pediatric hospice, and all these things I experienced, and it was a fight, right? Because I
Yes.
never had gone through this before. But I think it's nice to have a birth announcement, even when the child has passed away.
Yeah.
But
I
I
love
wouldn't
that.
send it to just anybody, right? I would only
Mhm.
send it to people who had
Exactly.
shown
And
some.
that's the whole thing, is to be very conscious of who you're sending it to.
Mhm,
Those who know, love you, and will absolutely support you
mhm.
in that place, rather than sending out to everyone that you know, and
Right.
you may not receive the kindness and the gentleness and the support
Mhm,
back. So just to be very conscious of who
mhm.
those are going out to. But that, I
And
thought that was really beautiful.
that's what we need. We need gentleness, and we need
Yes.
nurturing, and love, just abundant love and acceptance, right? I think we
Mhm.
fight death, right? I mean, I know you're in Canada, and I don't
Mhm.
know if the culture is similar to the
It
US.
is similar,
Or,
yes.
we just, death is the losing the battle, right?
Yeah.
We have this
Mhm.
language, and it's problematic for me,
Mhm. Yeah.
because it's part of life,
Mhm.
and it's a natural part of life. I don't know what everyone's fighting. We're all going to get there,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
Annie Lamott says, right,
Yes.
everybody, we're all going to have to live with the person we thought we couldn't live
Yes.
without,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and I just love that you're forming this community
Mhm.
online to
Mhm.
support and connect mothers,
Mhm.
so beautifully. I'm so
Yeah.
honored to be here today, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wanted to also have you share, you speak about the memory box. And I
Mhm,
thought that was just so gorgeous. What a beautiful, beautiful way to really have a space to just
mhm.
remember your child and those little things that you gathered along the way. So maybe you could share the memory box, and that might be something that may be useful to a woman.
Yeah. Cubby, my mentor, recommended doing that. And so she said, get a box and then put, because the life is so short, and we don't know the personalities of these children, right? We don't know if they
Mhm.
like chocolate or whatever. So that's a little bit difficult, right, to
Mhm.
honor them too. What I did was I cut out phrases from the sympathy cards, and I had pasted them on this wooden box, and I put ribbon, and I had gone to Michael's, and they had those, those stickers,
Mhm.
joy, rejoice, you had a baby girl. And I remember sitting there going, can I get this? And she had already passed away. And I did, I bought them and I put them in the box. And I just put some pictures that were special to me, and things that got me through. And I still go into the box sometimes, some little gifts people had gotten her. Um, and it's just a nice container for the memories, right? It's really
Yes,
a memory box.
it is.
And it's just a
And
space.
what I loved about it also was that it's giving the mother or mother and father, the family, permission to really honor every step of the way. Like, yes, I had a baby girl, or yes, I had a baby boy.
Mm,
And I know a lot of mothers, particularly, wonder if it's okay to grieve. They wonder if it's okay to say, I had a baby boy. Of course.
of course.
And what I love that you went to Michael's and found that and put that in your box.
Mm,
Because
mm.
yes, you did have a baby girl. You do have a baby girl
Right.
in spirit. And how lovely just to have that little space, to pull out whenever you desire.
Yeah. And I know people who said, oh, well, my coworker, had a stillborn, but I don't want to remind her.
Yeah,
So I don't bring it up. And I said, she doesn't forget.
that's
She
right.
does. There's not a day that goes by that she. So
Exactly.
and I think we can just kind of gauge, right? There are people who don't want to talk about it. I think most women and families do want to talk about it. I do.
Yes, I do as well.
And if they don't, that then we stop, right? Or we can send notes to each other, right? And things like that.
Yeah.
Um, it's just it was such an intense time, and no preparation for it.
Right.
We don't have any preparation. We don't have preparation for becoming a parent, right? But it's so important to remember that we are mothers of all these children we've birthed, and I honor the miscarried babies as well. And I want so much for people to be aware, especially in their communities, right? So many in their communities, when there's a new baby, there's a meal train, and people stop by and they're cuddling the baby. And then for those of us with losses who need more support, there's nothing. We are just off the radar. And so that's part of the work I think we need to do to increase support and increase our networks, and really, and that's why I teach a class on my book, and it's on Zoom for now, where we just go through this, what not to say. Please don't tell me it's for the best, or all these things people say. There's a woman I met whose father died. She was pretty young, and I said to her, I said, it sucks, it will always hurt, and I'm here for you. And she said, you were the only one who told me that. I feel like that was the truth. And like, just to, the grief doesn't go away, right? People want it to be done, and you put it in a package, and maybe after 2 years we can move on, but we take it with us, right?
Exactly.
We take
That's
it with us.
exactly right. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, I had a mother, and I knew her daughter, and her daughter had passed away, and 2 years had gone by, and nobody had mentioned her daughter's name.
Oh,
No one had mentioned her daughter's name. And when we connected, I told stories that I knew, just stories to bring her back to her life in the way that she knew in the way that I knew she needed. Her heart needed it. And she was just so grateful. She was just like, thank you so much. Nobody speaks of her. And it's like she's disappeared, but she's still with me. And so it's just so important to remember.
And to speak the name.
To speak the name, yes.
I
just had a conversation with a woman a couple days ago about that very thing. A family member had a stillbirth, and nobody was speaking of the stillbirth, and she wondered if it was okay to speak her name with her. And I said, just follow her guidance, but yes, speak her name. And if she shuts down, give her some space, but just allow her to open up. And if she's grateful, she'll show up pretty quickly. But we really need to honor those who we've lost.
Yeah, and holidays are hard as well, right? And I still buy an angel ornament. I get a few of them, and I give them to my parents and my sister, because it's so, you have that space, right, where their bodies were, and they're not there anymore. And so it's so nice to have them in our space, right? And have things up on the wall, and have these little memories and mementos. And you don't remember so much, right? When you're going through it, it's even when it's coming, it's so quick, and you're still in shock. And my midwives took a tree of life of the placenta. I had no idea they did that, and so I have that framed in my office. And then my midwife Annie had made a rose, a baby coming out of a flower, and I have that in my office as well. So just thoughtful notes are so nice in the holidays, or make a donation, even a small one, in the baby's name. And I have a friend who brings me roses every year on Mary Rose's birthday. It's so sweet.
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
it's so sweet.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And you also mentioned Mother's Day. Since we're speaking of holidays, you mentioned Mother's Day.
I do.
And it is such a difficult day for so many.
It is. And we spoke about that bereaved Mother's Day, and I would like to toss that out the window, because again, they're separating us, right? And they're creating this dichotomy, well, we have living children and you don't. So you get the Sunday
Yeah.
before. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, right?
No.
And I think that just shows our discomfort, right?
Yeah.
There's a video on my website that I did on about Mother's Day with Linda Cheldelenfell, who did grief. She does grief diaries and the International Institute of Grief. Her daughter had passed away. She was in a hidden car accident at, I think, 15 something. Beautiful girl. And so she does all this grief work, and she wanted to talk to me specifically about how do we feel on Mother's Day and how do we mother our children. And I think we have to do that together, right? The world's not ready for us.
No.
But together,
No, not yet.
we can do,
We can create
have
that
that space,
change.
and have the
Yeah.
space, and just be. I think it's about authenticity and being authentic to all our pregnancies, and
Yeah.
and acknowledging the children.
Exactly. And moving on, in your little section here about Thanksgiving, gratitude, and grief. You say, where do grieving mothers fit in? It is remembering our children who are no longer here as a sign of ingratitude. And where someone came to you and said, Dianna, it's time to find closure. You need to move on.
My therapist
My
did not say that, by the way. A therapist wouldn't say that. Yeah. I had a woman say one time, don't think about what you don't have. You have one son, and just focus on your son. And I was like, just doesn't make sense. That doesn't make any sense, because we become sick in our bodies when we deny our grief.
Yes.
We have to process it. We all know stories of people who didn't deal with their grief and then they became physically ill.
Yes.
It's just so important that we, in our own way, in our own time, not everybody's going to do what you did or I did, but just taking the space to hold it, to feel it. It stinks, it hurts, and move through it as it changes. Again, for me, it hasn't gone away. It's we're going on how many years now? 7. In August, and and some years are worse than others, and you don't know why. I remember year 4 was very difficult for me, and I didn't understand why it was harder than 3. So we just go with it. We just have to go with it.
Yeah, and just really honoring that process of, okay, so I'm going through a difficult time now, and I need to just speak to your family, your friends, whoever it is that's closest around you, and just ask them to help to support you. I think reach out to someone and really ask for that support when you're feeling really challenged by the grief. Yes, so I have almost this entire 2 pages completely underlined. Oh, and the next page as well. So
which part is that? The Thanksgiving? Is that the Thanksgiving part?
Yes, it is. And discussing other people's sympathy, wanting to make sense out of trauma and grief, and I cannot do it alone. People change the subject and smile uncomfortably. I've experienced that so many times, and I know so many women who have as well.
Tracy, I had a mother at the beginning of school one year say to me, "It is so easy for you. You have one child and you don't have to worry on Carline." And I was so stunned, right? Because it's not easy when you have losses in your family. And I did tell her I had a child who died. I couldn't help it, because there's that competition, who has 4 kids and who's more busy and who's more tired. And it's like, come on, people, we don't have to have this competition. So people say things like that and they just don't realize how much it hurts. They just don't understand. And you never know when you look at someone what they're going through. You never know what's going on in a family.
Exactly.
I never ask a woman if she has children, because if she has them, they come up in conversation. I don't need to bring it up, and I don't ever want to hurt someone or remind them. of something they want and don't have.
Yes.
And some, of course, are childless by choice and very happy that way.
Mhm.
And it's all good. It's all fine for all of us. But I feel like those of us with the losses are the ones that we just don't quite fit quite right in
Mhm.
society. Like,
That's exactly right.
there's just not quite a carved space for us.
Mhm. Exactly. I know. I often tell the story of when for the very first time I ever spoke in a public situation, a woman had asked me if I had any kids or how many kids do you have?
Hmm, hmm.
And for the first time ever, I said, I have none, but I've had multiple miscarriages. And she turned her back to me and did not speak to me for the rest of the night. And that was the very first time that I had ever
Wow.
spoken of my losses to anyone other than immediate family. And it just crushed me at
It
the
crushed us.
time.
And wouldn't it have been nice if she said, I am so sorry for your
Yeah.
losses?
Mhm.
Many people cannot acknowledge, because they ask me, I always say I have two children.
Mhm.
Um, and one died if they ask me, and people get very uncomfortable, but they asked a question and I answered it honestly. I told them my truth.
Yes.
Um, Maybe
Yes.
that's the problem, that we're honest.
Yes, I can honestly say that I can speak that now without any effort. I don't try to hide it. I don't try to cover it up. It is my truth. It is my experience. And I can hold the space for myself now if someone reacts in such a manner. But
Mhm.
it can be so heartbreaking for a woman who's still holding that deep grief. Um, or even years afterwards, like it really unresolved grief can carry on, as we've already said, for a lifetime. It can carry
Mhm.
on for a lifetime. And just to be, if somebody is listening to this conversation and maybe has not experienced a child loss, but you're just curious, or maybe you have a daughter or a granddaughter who's had a loss, just there's so much wisdom in this, and Dianna just has so much. I'll share a link for her book if she'd like at the end of this conversation, and she just has so much wisdom here that can be so supportive to you and to the women in your lives, and their fathers, the parents as a whole. So thank you for that. And then there's another thing here that I just love. You spoke of Cubby already. And so over nearing the end of the book on page 99, you say that Cubby has said to you, Mary Rose deserves dignity. She will always live in your heart, and she will always give you strength. And I could just feel that. I could feel the energy that she was giving to you, to just hold on to that, hold on to that. She deserves
Yeah.
dignity and will always live in your heart.
No one else told me that.
Like a wise woman.
No one else told me that, right?
Yeah.
And she had gone through it. She
Yeah.
lost her son Francis, um, and that was her mission, was to get people to enjoy the time they had with their children,
Mhm.
accept them, love them, know that they were
Mhm.
still part of the family. She was Catholic. They were going to be her intercessors, and
Yes.
just this profound celebration of this child that the world's rejecting, right?
Yeah.
They're incompatible with life. We have all this language
Mhm.
around these children. But what happens if we stop being ableist, and we do open our hearts to people who are differently abled and have different lifespans and all of that? And it was,
Exactly.
but she did it so, it was like such a mission for Cubby, and it was so beautiful. When I was putting the book together, I talked to the publisher and I said, I think I want to put Cubby's emails in there because they meant so much to me and they can comfort other people.
Mhm.
And I was so glad that we did that and we
Yes.
got to put those
Yes.
in there, because those were beautiful.
Absolutely.
And that was in the middle of the night when you're crying and you can't sleep and you don't know how to do this. And
Mhm.
how do you birth a baby who's going to die? It's hard to birth a
Yeah.
baby who's going to
Yeah.
and and the other thing is that there loss of children at different ages, right? And then
Mhm.
there are the stillborns. there's a different nuance to being pregnant, knowing your baby's going to die with the hormones. The families of the stillborns had mostly happy pregnancies and they've got the nursery room ready, and it's very different. But for these families who know, um, even a mom with a loss does not necessarily know what to say, because it's so different. And that the hormones were so challenging. You want to nest and prepare a space for this child, and you're talking about a funeral, right? And you have a casket, and it's just so and I also wish people wouldn't put their own beliefs on you, whether it's in a religious faith or in a new age way. Your words are creating the illness, or this stuff happens, right? There's suffering on this planet, and we can suffer gracefully. Fighting it doesn't make it go away.
No, it doesn't.
At least it never did for me. I mean, fighting this, and my baby's gonna live, or I'm just not gonna believe the diagnosis when our tests now are 99.9% accurate. And again, I just think we need to shift people's language and comfort level, and until we can accept death as a beautiful part of life, as a time of honoring this transition from one plane to the next, it's hard for people to understand.
Yes, that's right. And I just was thinking, as you were sharing about Cubby, through your book, her mission is being carried forward. It's being carried forward even without her being present in this life. She is still doing her work from the other side. She will ensure that the women that need to hear this message, that need this wisdom, this medicine, will get this information. So
that's beautiful. It's the power of words, right?
It is the power of words. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this book is on Amazon in the States. You can get the paperback, but there's a Kindle version in the UK and in Canada. So it is available.
Okay. So we'll make sure these links are added when this video gets uploaded. And then finally, this last one of the last sentences, to live with infant death is to live. Oh, to live with infant death is to live. That just so touched me so deeply. And I've never had infant death, but I could feel the power behind those words, and just that's something so beautiful to carry forward for those women, for yourself, and for those women who are going through this or have yet to go through this.
People have said to me, I could never have lived through it. I mean, you do.
Yeah.
We live through tragedies, and we live through trauma, and we live through grief, and it's part, you can fight it or you can integrate it, right? But that's exactly the truth. We have to, we're living. And I wrote the book to say to people, you can do it too.
Yeah.
I survived it. You can survive it too.
Yes.
You can't see very far ahead, right, when you're in it. And it's so important to me that you take the experience and you make it into something beautiful, and you transform it for others. It was so important. So my gift, Mary Rose, was a gift, right? And I can give her to others.
That's right. That's exactly right. So your book, once again, is Walking the Labyrinth of My Heart, a journey of pregnancy, grief, and newborn death. And we'll make sure those links are put up for you. Dianna, it's been a joy and a pleasure to speak with you. And I know that this is going to be so helpful to so many women. So
thank you for reading my book so closely and for all your kind words.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It was a joy to read, and really deeply, deeply touched my heart. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, everyone, thank you. And we'll be sharing the links below this video. And until we meet next time, take care.